Hello everyone. Continuing on with our City of Ember, we will recap. We got to a really exciting part last time. Dune and Lena had gone down into the pipeworks. They were following what the instructions said. They found the rock marked with an E, and then they found the ledge that they looked over, and they saw the ladder going down. So they went down the ladder, and they came across a small steel panel where they found a silver key hanging on a hook, and that is where we left off. So Lena reached for it and then drew her hand back. "Shall I do it?" she said. "Or shall you?" "You do it," said Dune. So she took the key from its hook and put it in the keyhole. She turned it and felt a click. She grasped the door handle and pushed, but nothing happened. She pushed harder. "It won't budge," she said. "Well, maybe it opens outward," said Dune. Lena pulled. The door still didn't move. "It has to open," she said. We unlocked it." She pulled and pushed and hauled on the handle, and the door moved not inward or outward, but sideways. "Oh, this is how it goes," cried Lena. She pulled the handle to the left, and with a deep rasping sound, the door slid away into a slot in the wall. Behind it was a space of utter darkness. They stared. Lena had expected to see something when the door opened. She had thought there would be light behind it and a path or road. "Well, shall we go in?" said Lena. Dune nodded. Lena stepped across the threshold. The air had a dank, stuffy smell. She turned to the right and put her hand against the wall. It was smooth and flat. The floor, too, was smooth. "Well, there might be a light switch," she said. She patted the wall just inside the door, from the floor to as high as she could reach, but found nothing. Dune turned left and fell on the other side, and felt on the other side with the same result. "Nothing," he said. Very slowly, keeping a hand to the wall and tapping the floor cautiously with their feet before every step, Dune and Lena had made their way in opposite directions. Each of them soon came to a corner and turned again. Now they were going deeper into the dark. They both had the same thought. Is the way out of Ember a long, dark tunnel? Must we go mile after mile in absolute darkness? But suddenly, Lena gave a yelp of surprise. "Oh, something's here on the floor," she said. Her foot had banged against a hard object. She knelt down and touched it cautiously with her hands. It was a metal cube about a foot square. "Oh, it's a box, I think. 2 boxes," she added as she further explored. Dune took a step toward her in the darkness, and his knees banged into a hard edge. "Oh, there's something else here too," he said. "Not a box." He ran his hands along it. "It's big and has a curved edge." "Well, these boxes are small enough to lift," said Lena. "Let's take them out where it's lighter and see what they are. Come and help." Dune made his way to Lena and picked up one of the boxes. They walked back through the door and set the boxes down a few feet from the river's edge. They were made of dark green metal and had gray metal handles on top and a kind of latch on the side. The latches opened easily. Lena and Dune raised the hinged lids and looked inside. And what they saw puzzled and disappointed them. Lena's box was full of smooth white rods, each about 10 inches long. At the end of each one, a little bit of string poked out. In Dune's box were dozens of small packets wrapped in a slippery material. He opened one and found a lot of short wooden sticks, each with a blue blob on the end. Both boxes had labels on the inside of the lid. The label on Lena's box said candles. The label on Dune's said matches. And under it was a white, inch-wide strip of some kind of rough, pebbly material. "What does candles mean?" Lena said, puzzled. She took out one of the white rods. It felt slick, almost greasy. "And what does matches mean?" said Dune. "Matches what?" He took one of the small sticks from its packet. The blue stuff on the end was not wood. Could it be something to write with, like a pencil? Maybe it writes blue. But what's the point of a whole box of tiny pencils, asked Lena. I don't understand. Dune frowned at the little blue-tipped stick. Well, I don't see what else it could be, he said finally. I'll try writing something with it. Well, on what? Dune looked around. The floor was too damp from the spray of the river to write on. Well, I could try it on the instructions, he said. Lena handed them to him, and carefully he rubbed the blue end of the stick along the edge of the paper. It didn't leave a mark. He rubbed it along his arm. No mark there either. Well, try this white stuff, Lena said, pointing to the white strip inside the lid of the box. He scraped the blue tip across the rough surface. Instantly, the end of the stick burst into flame. Dune cried out and flung the stick away. It landed on the floor a few feet off, where it burned brightly for a moment and then spurted out. They stared at each other, their mouths open in astonishment. There was a strange, sharp smell in the air that smarted in their noses. It makes fire, said Dune, and light. Let me try one, said Lena. She took a stick from the box and ran it across the rough strip. It blazed up fiercely, but she managed to hold on to it for a moment. And then she felt the heat on her fingers and let go, and the flaming stick dropped over the ledge and into the river. Fire stick, said Dune. Are they what saves Ember? Well, I don't see how they could be, said Lena. I mean, they're so small. They go out too fast. She shivered. This was not turning out the way that she thought it would. She held up one of the white things. Anyway, what are these for? Dune shook his head in bewilderment. Maybe a candle is a kind of handle, he said. Maybe you tie the stick on with strings and then you can hold it longer while it burns. It would still go out just as fast, Lena said. Yeah, said Dune, but it's all I can think of. Let's try it. With a great deal of effort, they looped the string of a rod around one of the sticks. Lena held the rod while Dune scraped the blue tip into flame. They watched the stick flare brightly, making shadows jump up behind them. The wood turned black, and the charred fire stick crumbled and dropped to the ground. But the light didn't go out. The string itself had caught fire. As they watched it, it sputtered and smoked and then burned steadily, filling the room with a warm glow. It's the movable light, said Dune in awe. All Lena's excitement flooded back. And now, she said, we can go back into the room and see what's there. They went back down the passage to the doorway and stepped inside. Lena held the movable light at arm's length before her. In its flickering glow, they saw something made of silvery metal. They walked slowly around, examining it. It was long and low, filling up the center of the room. One end of it came to a point. The other end was flat. Across the open middle stretched two metal strips. 4 stout ropes were attached to the outside, one at each end and one on each side. And on the floor of the thing were 2 poles, each flattened at one end. Look, said Lena, there's a word on its side. They squatted at the pointed end and held the flame near the word. It said, in square black letters, boat. Boat, repeated Dune. What does that mean? I don't know, said Lena. And here's another word on these poles. Paddles. The only paddle I know is the one Mrs. Polster uses on kids who misbehave in school. Once again, she took her copy of the instructions from her pocket and consulted it, holding it in the light of the flame. Look, she said, right here. Oat must mean boat. This is number 5, oat, stocked with neck, whip, ent, back, ont, s, eat. And the next part must say, oh, stocked with necessary equipment, said Dune. That must be what's in the boxes. Here's this. And Lena ran her finger across the next line. Number 6. Usi ops low, ter, head down st, usp, av, ks, and assist over rap. Oh, this word must be ropes, she said. Then lower, and then would this word be downstairs? Maybe it says head downstairs. That doesn't make sense, said Dune. There aren't any stairs except the ones that go up. He frowned at the word, and then he took a short, sharp breath. Downstream, he said. The word must be downstream. It must say something like, use the ropes to lower the boat and head downstream. He looked up at Lena and spoke in a voice full of wonder. The boat goes on the water. It's something to ride in. They stared at each other in the flickering light, realizing what this meant. There was no tunnel leading out of Ember. The way out was the river. To leave Ember, they must go on the river. And we just made it to chapter 15, called A Desperate Run. But this can't be right, said Dune. If the river is the only way out of Ember, why is there just one boat? I mean, it's only big enough for 2 people. I don't know, said Lena. It is strange. Well, let's look around some more. They stood up. Dune went back to where they'd left the boxes and got another candle. He brought it into the boat room and lit it, and the room grew twice as bright. Right away, they saw what they hadn't noticed before. In the back wall was a door almost as wide as the whole room. When they went up to it, they could see that it too was a sliding door. Dune took hold of the handle that was on the right and pulled it sideways, and the door rolled smoothly open to reveal more darkness. They stepped in. They could guess from the echoing sound of their voices when they spoke that they were in a tremendous room. Though the ceiling was low, they could see it just over their heads. The candlelight glinted off something shiny, and as they went in farther, they could see that the room was filled with boats, row upon row of them, all just like the one in the first room. There must be hundreds, Lena whispered. Enough for everyone, I suppose, said Dune. They wandered around a bit, but there wasn't really much to see. All the boats were the same. Each one contained 2 metal boxes and 2 paddles. The room was cold, and the air felt heavy in their lungs. The candle flames burned weakly, so they went back to the small room and slid the door closed behind them. I guess, said Lena, that this first boat is meant as a sort of example. We learn what's what on the one that has signs, like boats, paddles, candles, matches. They went back out to the river's edge. Lena blew out her candle and began closing up the boxes they had opened. Dune blew his out too. I'm going to take my candle with me, he said, to look at later. I want some matches as well. He took a packet of matches from the box and tucked it inside his shirt. Lena returned the boxes to the boat room and slid the door closed. Then she and Dune stood together on the ledge and gazed down. Less than a foot below, the river rushed by. A short distance downstream, it plunged into the dark mouth in the wall and disappeared. Well, he said, we found it. We found it, Lena repeated wonderingly. And tomorrow, at the start of the singing, said Dune, we will stand up in Harkin Square and tell the whole city. When they came out of the pipeworks, it was nearly 6 o'clock. They hadn't realized they'd been down there so long. Both Dune's father and Mrs. Murdo would be wondering where they are. They stood for a moment under a lamp post, just long enough to agree on a time to meet the next day and plan their announcement. Then they hurried home. When Dune's father asked why he was so late, he said his song rehearsal had gone long. He wanted to shout out to his father, "We found the way out, we're saved!" But he held himself in for the sake of his moment of glory. Tomorrow, when his father saw him on the steps of the gathering hall, He would be so overcome with surprise and pride that he would go weak in the knees, and the people standing next to him would have to catch him and hold him up. And the announcement about the thieving mayor, that would probably happen tomorrow too. Dune had almost forgotten the excitement of finding the boats, the mayor's arrest, and the city's rescue, both at once. It was going to be an amazing day. Racing thoughts kept Dune awake almost until morning. The day of the singing was a holiday for the entire city. All the stores and other businesses were closed. This meant that Dune didn't have to go to the pipeworks. His father didn't have to go to his shop either, but he was going to go anyhow. If he wasn't in his shop, fussing with his merchandise, he didn't know what to do with himself. Dune dawdled over his breakfast of carrot sticks and mashed turnips, waiting for his father to go. He wanted to get ready for the journey down the river. They probably wouldn't leave for a few days, and he and Lena would make their announcement tonight, and people would need time to get organized before they could leave the city. But he was too excited to sit around doing nothing. As soon as his father left, Dune slipped the case off his pillow. This would be his traveling pack. He put in the candle and the matches. He put in the key he'd borrowed from the pipeworks office. He put in a good-sized piece of rope that he'd found at the trash heaps, and he'd been saving for years, and a bottle of water. He put in an ancient folding knife that his father had given him, which had come down through generations of his family, and which he used to chop off his bangs when they got so long that they tickled his eyelids. He put in some extra clothes in case he got wet, and some paper and a pencil so that he could write down a record of the journey. Along with these things, he crammed in a small blanket. It might be cold in the new city. And a packet of food. 6 carrots, a handful of vitamins, some peas and mushrooms wrapped in a lettuce leaf, 2 boiled beets, and 2 boiled turnips. That should be enough. Surely when they got to where they were going, the people who lived there would give them something to eat. He tied the top of the pillowcase in a knot, and then he untied it again. He might want to add something else. He stood in the middle of the apartment and looked around at the jumble of stuff. There was nothing else here that he wanted to take with him. Nope, there was one thing. He went back into his room. From beneath his bed, he pulled out the pages of his bug book. He leafed through it. The white spider, the moth with the zigzag patterns on its wings, the bee, striped brown and yellow on its rear end. He looked at his drawings for a long time, memorizing their beauty and strangeness. Tiny fringes of hair, minute claws, jointed legs. Should he take this with him? There might not be creatures like this where they were going. He might never see such things again. But no, he'd leave it behind. His pack should be small and light. He put the bug book back under his bed and pulled out the box where he kept the green worms. He drew back the scarf to check his captive one more time. Several days before, the worm had done a curious thing. It had wrapped itself up in a blanket of threads. Since then, it had hung motionless from a bit of a cabbage stem. Dune had been watching it carefully. Either it was dead, or it was undergoing the change that he'd read about in the library book, but could hardly believe it was true. The change from a crawling thing to a flying thing. So far, the bundled up worm had shown no signs of life. But now he saw that it was wriggling. The whole wrapped up bundle, which was shaped like a large vitamin pill, bent slightly from side to side, then was still, then bent back and forth again. Something was pushing at the top end of it, and in a moment, the threads there split apart, and a dark furry knob emerged. Dune watched, holding his breath. Next came 2 hair-like legs, which clawed and plucked at the blanket. In a few minutes, the whole creature was out. Egress, thought Dune with a smile. The creature's wings were crushed flat against its body at first, but soon they opened, and Dune saw what his green worm had become, a moth with light brown wings. He lifted the box and carried it to the window. He opened the window and held the box out in the air. The moth waved its feathery feelers and took a few steps along the wilted cabbage leaf. For several minutes it stood still, its wings trembling slightly. Then it fluttered up into the air, rising higher and higher, until it was just a pale spot against the dark sky. Dune watched until the moth disappeared. He knew he had seen something marvelous. What was the power that had turned the worm into a moth? It was greater than any power the builders had had. He was sure of that. The power that ran the City of Ember was feeble by comparison, and about to run out. For a few minutes he stood by the window, looking out over the square and thinking again what to pack for his journey. Should he put in anything like nails or wire? Would he need money? Should he take some soap? And then he laughed and struck a hand against his head. He kept forgetting that the entire population of the city would be with him on the trip. If he needed something that he didn't have, someone would surely be able to supply it. So he tied a knot in his pillowcase and was about to close the window when he caught sight of 3 burly men wearing the red and brown uniform of the city guards striding into the square. They stopped and looked around for a moment. Then one of them confronted old humped-back Nanny Proggs, who was standing not far from the entrance to the small item shop. The guard towered over her, and she twisted her head sideways and squinted up at him. Dune could hear the guard's voice clearly. "We're looking for a boy named Harrow." "Why?" said Nammy. "Spreading vicious rumors," was the answer. "Do you know where he is?" Nammy hesitated a moment, and then she said, "I went off to the trash heaps just a minute ago." The guard nodded curtly and beckoned to his companions. They marched away. Spreading vicious rumors? Dune was so stunned that he stood still as a stone for a long moment. What could they possibly mean? But there was only one answer. It had to be what they'd told the assistant guard about the mayor. Why were they calling it a vicious rumor? It was the truth. He didn't understand it. He did understand, though, that Nammy Proggs had done him a favor. She must have seen that the guards meant him no good. She had protected him, at least for the moment, by sending the guards to the wrong place. Dune forced his mind to slow down and think. Why did the guards think he and Lena were lying? Obviously, they hadn't investigated the room in Tunnel 351. If they had, they'd have known he and Lena were telling the truth. He could think of only one other possibility. The guards, at least some of them, already knew what the mayor was doing. They knew about it and wanted it to stay a secret. And why? It was clear. The guards, too, were getting things from the storerooms. It had to be the answer. For a moment, the fear he'd felt when he saw the guards was replaced by rage. The familiar hot wave rose in him, and he wanted to grab a handful of his father's nails or pot shards and throw them against the wall. But all at once he remembered. If the guards were after him, they'd be after Lena too. He had to warn her. He dashed down the stairs, his anger turning into power for his running feet. And this will be where we end today.